Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great IG Live. I'm thankful because I have Becka Robinson on today, and she rocks. So she's going to join here. I see that she's already hopped on, which is awesome. She's fast. I hope everybody's having a good morning, a good afternoon, wherever you may be. I also am again this coming up because this week has been incredibly long. So looking forward to that taking place. All right. Hey.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Good. I'm trying to get my thing balanced.
All
right.
I have been kicked out of my office downstairs with children walking back and forth. That's why.
Oh, that's okay. It's
Suppose-
summer.
No.
Got it.
All right. You all good?
All good. Hi.
All right. So how's your morning going?
It's going. I woke up early and I was recording a podcast, and then I was doing a little work and had coffee with the kids and my husband, and now I'm here with you. Can't complain.
Wow. Talk about busy in the morning. That's a lot going on. I want to thank you first and foremost for being here and for being willing to make time in your busy day, because I know you're a busy person, to do this IG Live with me. So I'm very thankful and grateful that you've done that. And I appreciate you for doing that.
Oh, I'm so excited that you invited me. I love this stuff.
Anytime. For all of my people that don't follow you, that need to be following you, would you go ahead and just take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Becka Robinson, and you can find me at Bekah Robinson. It's pretty simple. I started about my deconstruction journey the most openly around the beginning of 2020 when I started a podcast about it with my two best friends. But it's been on for a decade. I just only openly started talking about it, and it's been the most incredible thing to have a space to talk about it and to find other people to talk about it with, and that connected Brad and I, so here I am.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to switch locations because somebody's in the kitchen making all kinds of noise, to say the least. She wants to use a blender, so, go figure. Okay, so what is, tell us a little bit about your religious background.
Yeah, happily. So I live in Florida, and I grew up here in Florida. So I've grown up in the South, and I was raised by two parents who had just recently undergone their own huge evangelical salvation experience in the 80s. And so my childhood was very heavily it was just their entire life at that point. And that was what I was raised in the midst of. So evangelical Christianity in the South, we popped around churches a lot as a young person, but they were almost always non-denominational or Pentecostal. I was affiliated with the Church of God for a long time, which is a Pentecostal denomination. That was probably where we spent the most time, and where I have the most conflicting feelings, because I loved it when I was there, but I now can see where a lot of the confusion and problematic things kind of started from that space. So evangelical Christian in the South of the United States.
Yeah, and Florida seems to, oh man, Florida's always in the news nowadays, right? So Florida is making some serious waves with their views and policies at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So tell me, what you went through this ongoing process of deconstruction. What was there a trigger point or something that made it begin for you?
Yeah. Um, so my trigger point, I'll give a trigger warning to anybody listening. My story involves infidelity and excommunication. So if any of you guys have sensitivities with that, you might just want to turn this off back at another time. I'm really public about what happened, and so that can be hard to hear for some people who struggle in this. So just fair warning. I grew up being involved in the church and service ministry. I music ministry, sang in choirs and on worship teams. Then all through college, I participated in a Christian organization at my university. I was not on staff, but I mean, basically as close to I was volunteer staff, you know, like I was on the worship team. And then after that, the band that I was in would get hired to come perform at youth camps and, you know, all the things that we had, like the spring break trip that was the Christian one and the fall one and all the camps and all the like revival things. And then we got hired by a church to be the music ministers. Like instead of hiring one music pastor, they just hired all of us as a band. And I was working there after college. So I was in ministry my entire life from when I was a toddler child in Sunday school all the way through until my early 20s when I got married to my high school sweetheart. It was the very traditional purity culture. We had been dating since 8th grade, but, you know, not living together, not having intercourse sex, not having sex. And we wanted to live together and we wanted to do all these things. So we were counseled that we needed to get married. It was not the right choice for either of us or what we wanted in our lives. But, you know, when you grow up in that way, that's just what you do. Like you go to school, you find the one person that's your person. You don't date around. You don't have a ton of experiences. You have very serious conversations about the rest of your life at way too young of an age. And then you just commit and that's it. So, I mean, we were engaged my senior year. We got married that summer. It was like textbook. But we had a great relationship through high school, but we didn't have a great relationship as young adults. There was a lot of struggles with trust and all that kind of thing. And so, really soon after we got married, we got divorced. And during that short window of time, I fell in love with one of my bandmates. And that was a huge problem for everybody involved because, you know, obviously that's a problem in general. But then when you add on ministry and all of the stuff about that, it becomes much more tricky. So when all of that became public knowledge and I was counseled to stay with my husband, work through everything. He was also at that point, so it was a giant mess. And I didn't want to. I was basically excommunicated. So it was like, do this thing, change your behavior, go back to how it was before, or we're done. Like you're out. We're done with you. And I just said, I can't do that. Like I knew. So it was the first time in my life and it's a messy part of my story. And I was a mess and we were all messes and we were all young and immature and didn't know what we were doing and had bad counsel. And we made messes of things. But that moment, and I share it because that moment was so pivotal because it was the first moment that I ever knew something like deep in my bones about myself.
Right.
I grew up in this belief structure that really separates you from your intuition and from your knowing and from your sense of self because you're taught like all my humanness, all my gut instincts, all my urges are evil. They're Satan trying to tempt me away. And so you're really taught, especially as women, to disconnect from that and not trust it. And I just knew I had this it was this stinking feeling, this sinking realization that this path that I'm on is not the right path for me. And this is my moment. This is my opportunity to change it. And if I go back, I'm going to get stuck there forever. I'm not going to be able to get out. And if I just plow forward with this, knowing that it's messy, knowing that it's hurting people, knowing that it's making people upset, knowing what it's going to cost me, I'll be able to get out and figure out my life and have that space to do it. And it was terrifying, and I lost pretty much all of my friends in my community up until that point. And that was the thing. So that was what started it over. For the first 5-ish years, I was kind of like really just grieving that loss of community and family and support system and this thing that was my whole life. Like, I thought that I was going to do music ministry for life. I thought I was going to be in Passion, Hillsong. I had people prophesy over me that that was what I was going to do. And I had never considered anything other than music ministry for my future. So when it was all gone, and I wasn't really wanted to come back, I just was like, I don't know what to do. I was 21, like so young. And I had this feeling of like, that's it. You know, my life's over. Because in evangelicalism, like, everything happens so young, and you're supposed to have everything figured out so young, that me, this 21-year-old, if you hooked me up to a lie detector test at that point, I would have told you that no one would ever love me again. I would never get married again. And that I had not, like, what was I going to do with my life? It was over. That I had just chosen to, like, throw everything away, because that was how convinced I was that that was what you do. So because of the way that that happened, and I'm not blaming anyone, like, I mean, obviously I see so many systemic problems with the way that, like, the evangelical church handles messy situations. Like, I know that they were just doing what they were trained to do, but what they were trained to do is what I have a problem with. And so that severing of relationships was what really kicked off my deconstruction, because I just couldn't bridge the gap again to come back to a community and a belief system that during one of the darkest times and messiest and hardest times of my life just basically was like, get it together or don't come back, you know? And so that kicked it off. That was when I was 21, so it was a little over, it was almost 15 years ago. Well, I guess 15 exactly now. And the last 5, 6, 7 years, I really started to live my deconstructed life with less fear, like being unafraid to try things, to say things. But I didn't publicly say anything about it until 2 years ago, really. I mean, it took me that long to feel like I wasn't just going to, like, burst into flames or something horrible.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So I mean, first of all, that's a horrific story, right? But it's a very common story.
Right.
When it comes to, I mean, my clients and people I've talked to, I tell you what, if you don't follow a strict set of rules, you're out. Doesn't matter what you do or how good of a person you are or anything. Not even necessarily how much money you give. A lot of times it's just you're out, right? So that was someone, Stephanie said, so brave, and that was incredibly brave, and actually really impressive for someone that is that young, going through that much turmoil, to have the intuitive understanding to say, hey, this is my opportunity. Either I do this or I'm stuck, like you said. I mean, that's incredibly impressive, because if I look back at my age, I mean, look back if I was like 21 at that time for me, I don't know if I would have made that decision, right? I don't know if I would have done that, just because I'm also a people pleaser, which isn't good either, right? So that's bad. So well done. I think that's amazing. And I love your story, and I think that it's so real, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
I mean, 10 years ago, but in the moment, I was like sitting on my kitchen floor drinking, you know, Jack Daniels from the bottle. So it's like, in retrospect, we can be like, great, it was so great, so brave, but in the moment, it's such a mess. And I think that I was always so afraid to talk about it, because right. I felt like my deconstruction was invalid because I had done something that was bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I felt like all the work that I did to heal myself, to grow, that I couldn't ever talk about it because it started because of this thing that, you know, it's not a positive thing. That was a messy situation. And so when I talked about it, it was relieving. It was really scary, but really relieving, because it was like, okay, well, now the worst is out there. Like, what could anybody say at this point? I've told them the worst thing about me, and like, go on. And it really opened the floodgates for me to be able to help people that grew up like me, especially women, but really anybody, to feel like they can take these things back for themselves. I use this word reclamation a lot, and reclaiming, because that's what, like, deconstruction is active, right? It's this experience that's not necessarily just the whole rest of your life. Like, what happens after you take something apart? Like, you don't just all the pieces, right? So
Right.
the idea of like reconstructing and reclaiming became really important to me, because I felt like there's a ton right now. Well, when I started going through it, there wasn't anything. There wasn't like construction memes and coaches and all of this amazing stuff. But there was definitely a lot of people talking about like, well, what happens after or during?
Yeah.
Like, you start deconstructing and then what? Like, what happens? How do you keep life? And so that was why me and my two girlfriends started our podcast, because we just wanted to have these conversations about like, well, how do you navigate it? Well, what do you do when this happens? Well, how did you get through that feeling? And just invite people into listening to us, joining us in those conversations, because the stories are what is so healing, right? It's not giving you a 3-step process. It's hearing a story from another person that you resonate with and seeing how they did it, that makes you feel like, okay, maybe I can do it. And then you can keep moving forward.
Ah, awesome. So in the midst of all of this decision-making, healing, all that's happening, and knowing that you lost obviously a lot of your friends, right? Which unfortunately is all too common. In that, how did you navigate that with your family?
Yeah. So I think I got off a little bit lucky in all of this compared to some of my friends who I've navigated deconstructions with them, like holding their hand as they're going through it, because my deconstruction and my divorce kind of all happened at the same time. So my family was so distracted by the life choice making with my divorce that we really didn't even get into the deconstruction part. So that was nice. And to be honest, I know that this is a huge thing for so many people, because I watch them go through it. I talk to them through it. But for me, it's kind of been different. My mom, I talked to her about it. Years later, I really kind of opened, like, I don't really believe in any of these things anymore, and I feel like I have a lot of trauma and stuff to work through from this, but I don't blame you. And like, we had like a really beautiful, open, healing conversation where she was, I'm sorry, like, that's not what we were trying to do with that. You know, it was very good. And so she has a lot of for me and for whatever I want to explore. That's not really a problem. We have a lot of respect for each other in that.
Yeah.
My dad and I don't have a relationship because of just how we grew up, and just because of some health things that he deals with. He doesn't really know a lot about my life as I am. He kind of pictures me as he imagines me to be. And so it's just kind of a non-issue with him. We don't talk about it. And then with any other family members, it's just kind of like this is just where I'm at, and we don't argue about it. We don't fight about it. It's this gift from the universe that it's like one less thing for me to have to fight through. They just gave me I got family members that just were like, whatever.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, because because majority of the time it seems like it doesn't work out that well, right? I mean, we've talked before, and like, you know, when I walked away, my mom, you know, basically, you know, said, well, goodbye, you're going to hell now, you know, kind of idea, right? So I'm so happy to hear that your parents are willing to talk and be open to who you are, right?
Yeah,
That's
no,
important.
said all the other stuff to me, not my family. So I got that from my community, which was like my chosen family, because I did, I'm an only child. I have a tenuous relationship with my dad. And so like, I really clung to my community. It felt like siblings that I had never grown up with. It felt like aunts and uncles. Like, it was my church family. And so I think I experienced what a lot of people feel when their nuclear family has those reactions through that. Like, I was told that I would be an adulteress, that it didn't matter what relationships I ever had, I would bring that sin onto any man that decided to ever be with me, that unless I went back to my first husband and back to the church, that no matter what in life, I was being handed over to Satan, that it didn't matter what I did, like I would never be redeemed from this choice. I was just really toxic, nasty things.
Right.
And they were so hurtful to me for so long, and really screwed with my mind for a decade. I mean, for a decade. It took me until the last few years when I told people, like when I actually verbally said the things that other people had said to me, and I saw other people's reaction. Because when I told people in the church what the church people said to me, they were kind of just like, right, yeah. You know, like they agreed with what the church people said. When I told people outside of that community what had been said to me, the looks on their faces was just like, what? And that's such a healing moment when you're sharing this experience and someone like validates that. They were like, that's a horrible, no one should ever say that to another human being. Like, that's toxic, that's abusive, that's so mean. And I was like, oh yeah, that's what I felt too. But like everyone else said it was love.
Yeah.
And so that was really helpful and healing for me. And that's a big part of the narrative that I share, is the journey of like growing up my whole life being told that fear sounded like love, and having to relearn what the voices are inside my own head, right? Like that's not actually love. That's actually hate. That's actually fear. Mm-hmm. And having to kind of disconnect those and relearn what they sound like.
Mm. No, I mean, coming from that community, yeah, I can understand all you hear is the negative, right? I mean, and how you've basically ruined your life. But there's a lot of people I talk that have never been in the church.
Yeah.
Just like, that's so strange. Why would anybody ever say stuff like that? You know, I mean, they're dumbfounded because they didn't grow up in that toxic type of environment. I discovered that when I started getting out away from the church and actually befriending people that were non-Christian, if you want to call them that. It was like, yeah, do you realize how dumb that sounds and how illogical that is? And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right.
So nice. It's like when you tell somebody something and their face is just like, what? And you're just like, oh yeah, that is a big deal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry. You know, so let me ask you this. Your IG Live page covers a ton of multiple religious topics, right? So is there one topic that really gets you fired up?
Yeah, because it's kind of just followed my journey. At first, it was just like this outlet, you know, for me, and share stuff that I was writing or whatever, thoughts, process. I process a lot through art.
Right.
It kind of went all over the place as my journey was big and as I was reaching into all these different areas. But I think that the things have to do with that power inside yourself, to that sense of self, that groundedness. So even though there are a lot of different outlets that I use to get there myself and to talk with other people about it, they all are, that's kind of the common thread, is reclamation. So
Right.
About people healing from purity culture and the effects of that, because that's been a huge thing for me with that divorce, and then, you know, future relationships, and just starting to identify these toxic thought patterns I have, or habits that I have that were rooted in that need to be deconstructed and healed. And so reclaiming sexuality is really big for me. Reclaiming holidays is really big for me, because that was hard when I left Christianity. When I left evangelicalism, I felt like I lost Christmas and Easter, and that was really sad for me. Like, it sounds small, but it was hugely sad for me. And so I took a lot of time to heal that, and to build new traditions with my family, to find things that felt deeply meaningful. And so I talk a lot about those things as those holidays circle around. But really, it's just about embodiment and reconnecting, especially for women, that permission to ask questions, that permission to listen to your intuition, that permission to ground yourself in yourself and not be looking towards some other form of affirmation or consent. And now I just feel like with everything that's happening, it's like I'm even more emboldened, because it's like, this feels like such an important time for everybody, but women especially, to be understanding that being disconnected from that center is how we get off course, how we get confused, how we get taken advantage of. So it's like, when we can find that again, when we can trust ourselves again, we can bring so much more power and autonomy back to our lives.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. And I personally can relate to the losing Christmas and Easter. For years, I didn't know what to do, right? Because it's like every song is, you know, something about Jesus, and, you know, all this other kind of stuff. And so it's like, man, where do I find the joy in Christmas, right, anymore, you know? And so my wife bought me this mug. It says, Merry Winter Solstice, you thieving Christian bastards, that I'm drinking up, right? So I've tapped into some different aspects of Christmas that don't have anything to do with religion, in a sense, right? So, or Christianity, I should say. And so found some joy in that. But I totally agree with you that during this time, especially during this time, that women and their voices need to be heard, and heard clearly, with everything that's going on. So another reason why I love, obviously, your page with that. So let me say this. I love the way that you hold space for people. Okay, it's a safe space. People can go there and be who they want to be, and know that they will be loved and accepted. Everything the church claims they are, but they don't do.
Yeah.
Right? Really is what it comes down to. So what is it that led you to create, you know, your page for this purpose?
Yeah, I really care where I end up. I think that is what separates me now from so much of that evangelical belief systems. Like, I don't care where people land. I just care that they feel deeply centered and grounded and rooted and safe in it. And so the podcast that I produce, it's called Prone to Wonder, which is a play on the old hymn, Prone to Wonder.
I recognize that right away.
And all just conversations about the experience of deconstruction, reconstruction, reclaiming, just processing through all of this stuff. And as we started to have these conversations and open it, we realized there was no end point. We weren't taking people through something. We weren't teaching anything. And we realized, like, that's not the goal here. The goal is to just guide you back to yourself, and yourself is going to guide you to whatever the thing is for you. Like, whatever works for me doesn't necessarily work for everybody else. And it's not about teaching people to leave Christianity and come to this other solution. It's about teaching people to leave something that disconnects them from themselves, find a way to reconnect to themselves, and then use that guidance to figure out what the next thing is for them. So my page is, I mean, it's open. I have Christians that follow it and that remark on my things. I have people that are, you know, like progressive Christians that kind of separate from evangelicalism but still really believe in the same religious basis. I have Jewish people, I have witches and pagan people, and like all these different people. And my feeling is like, as long as you're not hurtful or rude to me, I don't care what you believe. I just want I want it to make you feel good. And as long as you can be kind to me and to the other people here, then we have space to have a conversation about it. And that's really it. So I hold space for everybody on my page as long as they're not being abusive and rude. If they're abusive and rude, then they're disinvited. But other than that, anybody can come and talk and share, because I find that I get so much inspiration from how other people have found solutions for themselves, even with the holidays. So I drew so much inspiration from like Wiccans and pagans in their festivals, and that was a huge part of how I healed that for me and what we did for my family, because I felt deeply connected to very nature-based systems. I don't necessarily consider myself a witch or Wiccan or pagan or anything, but I resonate a lot with like the wheel of the year and the solstices and the equinoxes, and I find so much depth and beauty and significance in the symbolism that they created and that they celebrated in their really ancient pre-Christianity festivals. And when you look at those, and when you look at Christianity and any of the main religions, you can see these threads that run through all of them. And so when I was trying to figure out how to make Christmas feel significant without the nativity story, I was like, well, let's go further back, like before all of that. And what was it about? And if you look at the nature-based religions, it was about the depth of winter turning. It was about hitting that tipping point where it can't get any worse. It's only going to get better. And that hope. So that was what it was all about. And that's what the nativity story is about as well. It's about hope. It's a story of hope. It's a story of darkness descending, light returning to the world, and it's sparking a hope for the future. And that's what Yule was about. And so I was like, okay, well, I can keep the significance, I can keep the meaning without the dogma, and I can still make this a beautiful, reflective, deeply meaningful time for myself and my family. So I love hearing from all different people for what resonates with them, because it helps me heal my own things and helps me find ways to reconnect that feel special and significant to me.
That's amazing. Yeah, and it's nice to hear someone else that celebrates Yule as well. You know, because
like we don't call it Yule versus Christmas. Like I don't care. With my kids, I'm not like, you have to call it solstice.
No,
but we
no.
actually solstice thing in my house. We do it a couple of days before Christmas, because it's always a couple of days before Christmas. And we have like our own little solstice-y things that we do every year. And I almost feel like, you know, like you have friends growing up, it was like the dad was Christian, the mom was Jewish, and they kind of like did both things for Christmas. I kind of feel like that's what I've done now. We've got like Christmas without the nativity story. It's got like the Santas and the reindeers and the tree and the all candy canes. And then we've got solstice. And basically solstice came and it put the foundation under Christmas again that I felt like I lost when I took the nativity story out of it. I wanted to give my kids a connection to something. I wanted them to feel rooted and connected to a meaning that wasn't just presents and Santa and candy. And so look at what that season is really about. It's hope, and it's about endurance, and it's about fortitude, and it's about turning inward and turning to the safe places to get through the hard times. And so that's what we talk about, and that's what we celebrate. We make candles, and we bake, and, you know, we do all these like non-present-y things a couple of days before Christmas on solstice, and we talk about why they celebrated it and what it meant to them and what we can learn from that. And it gave me a way to feel that I was gifting my children something meaningful and significant, that wasn't a dogma, which was important to me.
Okay. Oh, very good. Very good. So let me ask you, are you still spiritual at all, or do you just kind of leave that open?
Yeah, I think I'm probably pretty spiritual. I think I'm very fluid with all of it. Because I don't feel like I'm as spiritual or as woo as some people, and I'm definitely not religious, and I don't have any answers, and I don't pretend that I have them. I've just become really comfortable in not knowing the answers and not needing to have an answer to give to somebody. That was a huge part of my journey, just not feeling like I had to validate where I was by having an answer. Omni spirit. He's been watching. I am spiritual fluid. So I've actually, this is something I get nervous about. If I'm being completely candid, I get nervous that people are like, you're just appropriating all these different rituals from all these different belief systems. And I kind of do. Like, if I'm being honest, I kind of do. I try to do it as respectfully as I can. I want to learn the history of it. I want to learn the why. And I follow what resonates deeply with me. And interestingly enough, after learning more about like my heritage through my grandparents, I found out that I actually do have a heritage that's tied to some of the Northern European areas where the pagan traditions I've been most pulled to are from. So I thought that was kind of cool. That was just like following your curiosity kind of led me back to that. But I'm just kind of trying to build something that feels beautiful and healing for myself and for my nervous system and for my kids. And I want them to have that as the base. And then as they get bigger, if they want to find something that is more specific to them, then great. But at least I gave them a foundation that was open and expansive while being grounded and rooted. So I do think I'm spiritual. I feel deeply connected to energetics, and I know that there's things I can't explain away, and I find a lot of beauty in all of that. But yeah, I think I kind of flow between all of it.
Okay, I love that answer, and I love the fact that you're raising your kids with the opportunity to critically think through things. Right? I mean, that's lost within the church, I think, at least from my perspective and coming through it my whole life. But I also love the aspect that you don't label yourself, unless you want to go with omni-spiritual or omni-fluid or spiritually, whatever. Right. Because I've got to ask that question too. It's like, well, Brad, where do you stand? And I refuse to label myself because I feel like labels are for other people, right? They're for them to be, okay, I can put you in this box now. The simple fact is I have probably fewer answers than ever before.
Yeah.
Still learning, and they may change. My ideas may change tomorrow. So I'm not going to label myself. So I love that answer. I think that's incredible of you to say that.
I think that's a big thing in deconstruction in general. So anybody that's here because you're going through this or you love someone that's going through it, I think that's a huge part of it is, as humans, we want certainty. That's why religions are so sticky. Like, because we want to understand the things we can't, and we want to put meaning behind things that are scary and chaotic. And so often, really well-intentioned humans in your life will be like, well, if you don't believe that anymore, what do you believe? Like, what's the truth? Because it's going to make them feel more certain to know that you're certain. And if you're uncertain, it's nerve-wracking to them. And so I don't want to put a label on myself because I'm constantly evolving. Like 6 years ago, I may have put a label on myself saying that I was pagan, but I'm not. Like, I was into learning about that at the time. And I'm so glad I didn't try and like commit myself to this, because then it would have felt really weird when I was like, So yeah, I don't think you need it. And I think that's something that you do have to, even that you have to deconstruct, like feeling that you need to label yourself and to have an answer and to fit in a category or you're not valid. My favorite example, I don't even know where it's from. Maybe someone listening will know the origin of the story, but my favorite example about spirituality and religion, that is just how I view everything now, is that there were these blind monks or priests or something, and they came across an elephant, and each of them came upon it and was touching a different part of the elephant. So one of the blind men was touching the trunk, one was touching the tail, one was touching a leg, one was touching the belly. And the one touching the trunk said, "Oh, this is an elephant." And the one touching the foot said, "That's not an elephant. This is an elephant." And the one touching the tail said, "That's not an elephant. This is an elephant." But they all couldn't see that the elephant was so big that they were all touching different parts of the elephant. But because theirs was slightly different than another part, they were convinced it wasn't the same thing. And they were convinced that they were right. And I feel that that is so much about what we as humans try to do with religion and spirituality. And I don't want to replace. I've been really careful because I didn't want to deconstruct and then just replace it with certainty in something else and being like, well, now I'm right about this thing and everyone else is wrong about it. So even when I do get really into a certain thing, like pagan rituals or whatever it is, I don't want to be like, well, this is the one truth, because I don't believe that. And I just, that's what's giving me peace and making me feel connected in that moment. And it might not forever. So if you're listening, permission granted to not know, to not have a label, and to flow between them as you explore. Like, that's the whole point. Is the great thing about deconstruction is you're not bound by those rules anymore. So like now you can taste test everything. Like, go sample everything, see what you like, see what resonates, see what feels healing, see what doesn't trigger you. You know, like, find the thing you do. And it may work for a couple years and you may evolve into something else, and that's fine too. Like, it's not any less true for you because it was true for a season. So yeah, I kind of can't stick with labels either.
No, I love that. And that's such an important point that you make, because a lot of people, when they leave an organized religion, have a very difficult time trusting their ability to make those decisions.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so I think that's incredibly important. And you're right. They may make those decisions. It's all about learning to trust yourself and saying, hey, you know what? It's okay to focus on myself instead of looking for permission to do something.
Yeah. And that's why I think the nature-based stuff was so healing to me, because it kind of gave me a framework. So like the connection to the earth and like the seasons and this idea of like a life, death, life cycle, which is so rooted to a lot of those like pre-patriarchal beliefs and groups and rituals. It just like, what works for a season is not going to work in the next season, and that's okay. That's how it's supposed to be. And what dies off in this season will be replaced for something in the next one, and that's okay. It's not wrong. It's like how it's supposed to be. And that was so healing to me, because it just felt like it reverberated this echo through everything in my life, where I was like, okay, like things can be constantly in flux. My therapist uses the word impermanence, and it's such a good one, because yeah, just because something's here for right now doesn't mean it's the thing forever. And just because it's gone doesn't mean that it was wrong when it was here. And it's all fine. It's all okay. We say that at the end of so many of our podcast episodes, when we like get to the end of a point and we realize like we haven't told anybody any sort of actual answer. We're like, it's all fine. It's all okay. It is. And it's like that moment of relief when you can exhale and just be like, oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that, because you're right. Just like the seasons change, you know, there's nothing, I'll say nothing permanent really. When it comes down to it, there are different seasons. When you were talking about that, I was thinking about my own life. It really triggered something for me to think about in a good trigger way, for me to think about. So that's awesome. So let me ask you this. I feel like I could keep asking you questions forever because it's fascinating. What are some ways best ways for someone to follow you, kind of join in with what you're doing?
It's really easy right now because I don't have a ton of places. The best way to follow all of these concepts about deconstruction and reclamation and all that kind of stuff is to follow me on Instagram and listen to my podcasts. That's where everything is right now. I don't even have a website up currently. It's all stuff I'm working on. My inbox this morning was actually filled with questions like, are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And I was like, probably, yeah. It's like whole expansion that's happening that I've just kind of, as a serial entrepreneur, it was really hard for me when I decided to use my page for this to not have like a plan, like a monetization plan, or like this is the end goal, to just be like, I'm just going to start and I'm just going to see where it goes and I'm going to see who I connect with. I'm going to see what I can build and I'm going to see how I can serve. And, so that's kind of where I've been following. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see me post about the podcast. The podcast also has a page, which is linked on my Instagram. And eventually when I have a website and all those things, that's probably where you'll hear about it on my Instagram.
Awesome. Well, you know, simplicity is sometimes the best way, right? So,
we do podcast episodes every other week. Sometimes we drop bonus episodes in between. And then I do Q&As in my stories every few weeks where we talk even more. So those are the best places to connect.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, listen, for anybody that is watching this or is going to watch this, give her a follow. I mean, seriously speaking, Becka, you are amazing. I love the safe space you provide. I love how open-minded you are. I love the fact that you're raising your kids to be critical thinkers. Just the all around. I mean, I'm just very thankful for you and your family. All that you
and this incredible platform you're giving people to share their stories. Like I said, I think stories are the most healing, and just being able to see other people and hear from them is just, it's worth so much more than anything else. Any book or any, you know, step-by-step plan, like just getting to hear other humans tell their stories is like it's like a balm for our souls.
Totally. It's like I heal when I hear someone else's story, and I feel like they heal even more when they feel heard and their stories heard, right?
Oh.
I love it. I love hearing people's stories, and I love encouraging them to keep on going, right? And being them and finding their true self, right? And not letting someone else dictate what you're supposed to think or believe or anything like that. So, so appreciative of you. I hope we can talk again some other time. And I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Bye.